flat major, B flat,
C minor, E minor, E flat major, F, G minor, A diminished.
right. So when we look at this, we don't have any common chords, right? So if I hadn't given you the hint of using modal borrowing, the first thing you would have done is do this and then thought, okay, I don't have any diatonic common chords here. So then you have to start thinking, well, what is another method by which I can do that? And in this particular case, I gave you the hint, but even if you looked at this and you thought, well, if this were G minor, then they'd be relative keys. That's the hint right there, right? Because if this were the key of G minor instead of G major, then we've got G minor, A diminished, B flat major, C minor, D, E flat, and F sharp diminished, right? So now by doing that, we've got these as common chords, we've got this as common chord, we've got these as common chords, we have these as common chords, we have these as common chords, right? So as soon as you use modal borrowing, it's very easy to get from one to another. So you could use the modally borrowed 4 and reinterpret it as 2. So this is the key, and then you went to C minor, then you could just go straight to cadencing in B flat major, right? So what I played there was G major 1, then C minor 4, and then I went to 1, 6, 4 in B flat. So B flat major over F, and 5, 7. David?
This might not be my best attempt at this, but my interpretation was a little bit more complex.
Okay.
Because
What'd you do?
I went from G major,
Mm-hmm.
then I went to the 5th, which was D major.
Mm-hmm.
And then, let me see, where did I take it? Then I did, let me see, then I did, then I went to an F, dominant 7.
So, if you do that, when you, let's say, that's going to be kind of a shock, right? Because as soon as we go from, we could go, but that it's not
Oh, I
smoothed over.
added one more thing in between.
Okay.
Then I went to, let me see, then I put A in the bass, and then put C, E flat, F.
So basically, just went to a 5, 6, 5 after your 5, 7.
And then I pivoted to that B flat major.
Right. So if I were analyzing this, so if you gave me that progression and I were doing a Roman numeral analysis of it, it would go in G major 1, 5, and there's no pivot chord here at all because I don't really have anything to call the F7 chord. So when you go to the F7 here, I would just, instead of having a pivot chord, I would just write B flat major 5, 7. So that is, you can just go to a key, but it's not as smooth as another one. So the nice thing about using modal borrowing in this case is that it smooths over the progression. Does that make sense?
Oh, so I mean, at least I tried.
Of course, of course. Okay, what's another chord that we could use a modally borrowed chord to pivot? Pal?
I did the E flat as the major 6.
Yeah, there you go. So you could just as easily do this progression where you go from G major 1 to the modally borrowed 6 chord, and then 1, 6, 4 in B flat major 5, 7, 1, right? So here's using the 4 as the pivot, That snare off.
Everybody's got their triggers.
Nobody likes a snare that's turned off. It's also the thing that is so easily forgotten. Including any of you were at the faculty recital that had like the first piano piece started. I was like, all right. Any other?
Will you give us the chord progression for modulating from the six?
Yes. So it was 1 in G major, modally borrowed 6, so an E flat major chord, and that pivots to become the 4 chord in the key of D flat major, and then 1 6 4 5 7. Okay, that's good.
So you don't have to establish the key? 'Cause I
Well,
thought- okay.
So if that's why I was trying to say, like, you don't have to write a whole long chord progression
Okay.
here. We're just trying to figure out how could you get there.
Okay, this is like a snippet. But
Yeah,
if
so I'm
you-
starting with a 1 chord just, to show that that's where we are.
Okay,
But likely speaking, these wouldn't be the first phrase of the piece. You would have had music in the key first, and then this would be how you get from one place to another.
okay.
So for that one specifically, what I was thinking was like, there was the 6, and then I went to what would have been the 4 in G minor, but it was, I guess, thinking like a 2 in B flat major,
Mm-hmm.
and then F, and then the B flat, is that what it was?
Sure. So essentially what you did was you used 2 modally borrowed chords before pivoting, right? So in that particular case, if you went from you go from G major, 1 chord, to the modally borrowed 6 chord, and then to the modally borrowed 4 chord, and then just straight to the 5, right? And then to the 1 chord. So same basic concept, just in a slightly different way. David?
So I'm get, does this warm up, transition us into our next topic, or is this just something, just to get us ready for the final composition?
It's more related to the final composition than anything else. So one of the things about where we are, so in terms of new harmony topics that we're going to discuss, really the only thing that we're going to talk about that's a new topic from here on in is 9th chords. And everything else we basically covered. So what something like this is doing is kind of consolidating that knowledge, right? So one of our topics has to do with modulation between remote keys. And exercise 12 is a harmonization where I ask you to modulate via common tone modulation, where you hold a common tone that's in one key and you hold it over and then it begins in a new key. But in terms of practicing these kinds of remote modulations, where you're really going to do it is in your final composition. So that is where I'm leading with this. And after we're done talking about this, I'm going to give you some more details about that final composition and how to approach it. Essentially, this is a composition exercise, right? And you're trying to get from one place to another place and using all of the tools at your disposal to do so. Okay? Because like I said, once you get into these kind of chromatic chords, it makes it so you can really modulate from any key to any other key smoothly if you can figure out the right way to do it. And this one has hints, but you could imagine a situation where you just needed to get from F minor to B major. And then you're like, okay, which of the many things that I know how to do allows me to do that at this point? Sometimes you start off and you're like, hey, one of these is a common chord, and you could, in between the 2 keys, and you can just use that. But now we're getting into things. The reason remote keys are harder to get between is they don't have as many, or in many cases, no common chords like we just saw with G major and B flat. Okay, so there are other possibilities, but using the E flat major chord or the C minor chord to pivot are probably the best ones, just because those are both predominants in the 2 keys. So those seem like good ideas. If you found a way to do it with another one of those common chords, that works too. Okay, let's talk about the next one. So we're getting from F minor to B major. Considerably more difficult because here's tonic and F minor. There's tonic and B major, right? As distant as you can get, essentially. Yeah, Rick.
Did you just play 1 to 5 and then 1 to 5, or you just
No, I
did 1
played
to
F minor
to B?
to B major.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Karen?
I used the 7 of 4, which would be reinterpreted the same, like if I respell it, instead of an A fully diminished 7 to a D sharp fully diminished 7.
Okay, so you're saying in F minor you used a 7/7,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which would, oh no, 7/7 of 4.
Mm.
So 4 would be B flat, so this chord would be an A fully diminished 7 chord.
Yeah.
And then what did you reinterpret that as?
So also the 7 of 4 in B.
Okay, yeah, so you use this as the 7/7 of 4
Mm-hmm.
in B major.
Mhm.
So let's see how that works. So the A fully diminished, because obviously this is not, we wouldn't think of this as being a fully diminished 7 chord. 4 in the key of B is E, so this would be a D sharp fully diminished 7 chord. Now, I briefly mentioned this, but we didn't spend as much time talking about enharmonic respellings of this chord as we did with the German augmented 6 or the French augmented 6. But the same phenomenon is used here, and in fact it's even easier to understand in some ways. Because basically, any note from a fully diminished 7th chord could be seen as the root, right? Because it's entirely symmetrical, meaning it's made entirely of minor thirds, so there's no way of saying like, oh, this is the root, or this is the root. So if we think of the notes in A fully diminished 7, A, C, E flat, G flat, and then we think of the notes in this one, D sharp, F sharp, make it even more obvious, I'll put it in this order, so D sharp, F sharp, A, C. Well, these are just enharmonics of one another, right? So going from that 7/7 of 4 in F minor and pivoting to the 7/7 of 4 in B major works just fine. Now, it doesn't have to be the one of 4, right? So, Shari, you did something different?
Well, yes, actually, I used the 7, the E diminished, and the D, in D minor.
D minor.
Or in B.
Oh,
The
B,
3,
okay.
yeah.
Okay,
E
so
flat, G, B flat, D flat.
so you used in the key of F minor, you used 7/7, right?
Right,
Which is E fully diminished 7,
yes,
and you reinterpreted that as what in the key of B?
D, which is minor, D sharp, F, A sharp, C sharp? No?
Well, no, you can't do that. So the important thing to remember is that
There's
when
a
you,
spelling the chord.
so you just said D sharp, F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. You said it was a
No,
minus.
it was no, D, no, F, exact natural.
So those are different notes though. So remember when we use so here's what you can do. You can reinterpret this as 7/7 in the key of B, because 7/7 in the key of B would be A sharp fully diminished 7. And if we take a look at these two chords, E fully diminished 7, E, G, B flat, D flat, A sharp fully diminished 7, A sharp, C sharp, E, G. It's the same chord, right? So that
Oh,
E fully diminished 7 chord can go elsewhere. But if you have notes, you can interpret an E fully diminished 7th chord as being something that's not a fully diminished 7th chord, right? Because it's just a single chord, you're reinterpreting it.
I thought it was respelled, if you respelled it, if it was, E flat was the same as D sharp. The only note that would have been different was, B flat is the same as A sharp and D flat is the same as C sharp.
So the chord, the E fully diminished 7 chord is
Right.
E, G, B flat, D flat.
Okay.
And when you
sorry.
Yeah, so that, I think that's
That's
where.
where I went wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have a question?
Oh, I figured it out. Thank
Okay, James?
So,
Okay, so I had another idea, could you?
Oh, wait, before the other
Oh,
idea,
sorry,
did you
yeah,
have
yeah,
another
sorry.
clarifying question, Sean?
well, no, so it would be